Okay, so I was in a bit of a rush last time, so let's pause and retrench here before moving on. Um, let's look at our example. It's very helpful. One of the nice things about doing visualization is that you can kind of check how things are going on. So I want to note here that, this is the data they've given. They've got two sets of two lines. So there's a year for each one. We've got sales at 1,000 and expenses at 400. And we can see that this corresponds to these two data points. We can also see that they have this options object down here, and it says title company performance. And if we look back up at the example, we see, of course, that company performance appears at the top. So we want to make sure that first of all, we would never publish a chart without a title. So we're going to go ahead and grab this title as well. So again, creating a variable, it's obviously just an object with one property at this point, which is the title property. And that's going to be the header of our chart. Sorry, just lost my train of thought there. Okay, so now we can come back and let's take a look at this. So we have chart.draw. So chart is the variable we created, which is holding our visualization and telling Google where to put it, right? So it's saying, look, this is a line chart and I want you to put it in this div. And then we're taking that variable, and because that variable is actually an object, a type of, it's actually a chart, right? It's actually a chart that's been defined and described by Google. And according to Google, there is this function available on it called draw, and we need to pass it both our data, right, which up here is this array to data table, and our options, which is this options object. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to call this my chart, and I'm going to say my chart.draw. And what's the name of my data is my data list. Oh no, wait, is that it? Oops. I think I lost something here. Oh no, here it is. Okay, here we go. See, I should have labeled this. Data table object. Okay, so I want to pass it my data table, and I want to pass it options. Okay, so not really sure what's going to happen right now. I think we're in pretty good shape. We've got our data, we've got our title, we've got everything else, I think. So let's see how we go. Ooh. Oh, all right. So here's this is really helpful. Okay, I know that you guys probably don't like it when you get errors, but errors are actually helpful if they're helpfully written. And it says data columns for axis 0 cannot be of type string. What does that mean? Well, remember we were mentioning before, I sort of pointed out before that our numbers, our value numbers, were showing up as strings, so we can, let's just add that console log back in here of my data list. Right, so this is the array of arrays that we've created. And I think what it's saying is, look, I don't like that this is of type string, and of course we notice that our numbers are strings. So how do we handle this? Well, there are the data types that we identify just by looking at them, like var num or var num equals 78. Actually have, we can sort of force something to be converted from a string to a number, assuming of course that it contains a number, right? It looks like a number. This is actually technically a number object, so we could also say this. Okay, this is a little bit more than we need to worry about in terms of the way that we're going to write our JavaScript for the most part, but it does give us a handy trick when we need to take something that is a string but looks like, that is a number but it's stored as a string, right, but it's surrounded in double quotes, and make it come out as a string. Make it come out as a number. So let's go ahead and reload this. Okay, so now our numbers are numbers, which is good. We're not getting that error. Uh-oh, and now we're getting some crazy thing called unknown header type 548 way deep in the JavaScript somewhere. Not an array. Interesting. All right, so let's take a look at debugging this guy now and see what we come up with. Okay, so if we're looking at our error here, so just again to clarify, we're getting, oops, it's a peek at the fix, right? We're getting this, it says unknown header type 548. This could be really confusing. We tried to look at the script is nonsense, right? But if we just sort of think again about what we're trying to do here, we're trying to build a data table. And we're trying to build a chart. And one of the things that we usually have with data sets is we have header values. And so one thing I notice is when it says unknown header type 548 is I actually noticed that 548 is actually the first number in here. And so the clue that that gives me is that actually probably, and if I look back again at my example, I realize, oh, wait a second. The first element, the first row of the data table that they use in their example is not actual data. It's actually the names of the columns. And so that's the part that we need to add to ours in order to get it to work properly, we expect. So how are we going to do this? There's any number of ways that we could do this, right? I mean, the thing that hopefully you guys are starting to see about programming is that it is a lot like writing. There's always more than one way to get the job done. And so in this case, what we're going to do is we're just going to do this really, really simply. I'm just going to say, okay, bar my headers. And I'm going to create an array, and I'm just going to get a list, and I'm going to say, look, the first one is the date, and the second one is unemployment, right? And then I need it to be the first element in my data list, because that's what is eventually going to get converted to my data table. And I'm going to say, okay, my data list push my header. Okay, and so what's going to happen is this is going to happen first, and then everything in my for loop is going to get added after that. And then hopefully by the time we get down here and we convert it to a data table, it'll have all of the parts that we need in order for this visualization to render. So again, that was just sort of an oversight on my part. I forgot to note that I needed a header row in addition to my actual data points here. Now that I have that, let's see if we can get this going. Ta-da! That is pretty awesome looking, I have to say. I'm pretty excited about that. Now, this is a lot of data. We have monthly data over a long time. And note that we haven't really, there's a lot of things that we haven't controlled for here, right? We haven't influenced the size or shape of this. We can see that our dates are getting cut off, a lot of them. They're in kind of a weird format. We see that what's the top value is 8,000, right? So we don't have any units. Like this chart has a lot of problems. It's technically functioning, but it still has a lot of problems in terms of being a quality visualization. But for now, we just kind of wanted to get to this point. So we've got this situation where we're loading data. We've got an interactive visualization coming out of it. And over the next week, what we're going to look at is how do we really refine the visualization here so that it, tells a story, and also how we can use, one thing that's challenging about this right now is that, our data is something that we downloaded from the internet, which is fine, but, this data updates every month. A lot of data that you work with is going to update on a regular basis, and how do you handle that? You don't necessarily always want to be downloading, uploading new data all the time. And so we're going to look at using something called Google Fusion Tables to actually pull JSON formatted data straight from essentially a Google spreadsheet so that you don't have to download data at all. So hopefully this was a reasonably clear overview. I know I had a couple of hiccups along the way, but we will be talking in more detail about these visualizations on Tuesday, and I hope you guys have a great weekend until then.